You really think about disasters, there are generally two distinct categories.
Right, yeah. The loud ones and the quiet ones.
Exactly. There's the earthquake.
Yeah.
The ground violently shakes, the walls fracture, and the destruction is just immediate. It's visible and undeniable.
You know precisely what is destroying your world in that moment.
Right, and you know exactly what you were running from. It's terrifying, but the parameters are entirely obvious. But then there is the second type of disaster, which is the termite infestation.
Oh, that is a fantastic analogy.
Yeah, because the house appears structurally flawless from the exterior. The paint is fresh, the roof is holding off the rain, yet deep inside the walls, in just total suffocating darkness, the very foundation of the building is being steadily chewed away.
It is a completely silent, microscopic violence.
Exactly. You remain totally oblivious to the fact that your home has been hollowed out until you, lean a shoulder against a load-bearing wall, and the entire structure simply dissolves into dust.
And that invisible erosion is really the perfect framework for what we are examining today. We are tracking this fundamental shift from external physical violence to deeply insidious psychological warfare.
We're watching the foundation rot.
We are. We really are.
And because you, the listener, have been on this massive journey with us through the first three arcs, the prophecies begin, the new prophecy and power of three, you already understand the architecture of this house.
The factions, the bloodlines, the whole history of these territories.
Right. For generations, the threats facing the clans were almost exclusively earthquakes. You track the two legs, obliterating the old forest with heavy machinery. You watch the cats navigate physical starvation, horrific badger attacks, and, bloody border skirmishes over territory.
But the thing is, physical threats united the clans, or at least they provided a tangible enemy to coordinate against.
Yeah, a common foe.
Right. But in this fourth arc, Omen of the Stars, the paradigm completely flips. The threat becomes existential. The dead are rising.
Which is just a massive escalation.
Oh, absolutely. And they are not rising merely to haunt the living or to inflict physical casualties. They are actively breaching the psychological barrier between the waking world and the afterlife to recruit the living.
They're building a sleeper agent network.
Exactly, within the very ranks of the clans themselves. It is a masterclass in long-term narrative payoff.
So our mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct how this arc serves as the ultimate sweeping climax to the generation-spanning saga we've been analyzing.
This is where old heroes, burgeoning superpowers, and a literal apocalyptic war between the feline equivalents of Heaven and Hell StarClan and the Dark Forest finally collide.
But it all hinges on the execution of a single, highly cryptic prophecy that we were handed at the very end of the previous arc, which is, and I quote, "The end of the stars draws near. Three must become four to battle the darkness that lasts forever."
And the mechanics of that prophecy immediately put our established characters into a state of severe anxiety.
I mean, wouldn't you be anxious?
Oh, without a doubt. By the end of the third arc, Lionblaze and Jayfeather firmly believed they were 2/3 of the promised three.
Right, because Lionblaze possesses sheer physical invincibility in combat, and Jayfeather, despite being physically blind, can project his consciousness into the dreams and memories of others.
But the third member of their sibling trio, Hollyleaf, possessed no supernatural abilities whatsoever.
And then she subsequently vanished into a collapsing underground tunnel, totally presumed dead.
Which leaves the two brothers staring at this massive cosmic deficit. They have the absolute mandate to save the world, but they are missing the crucial third piece of the puzzle.
And the bloodline rules dictating this prophecy are notoriously strict, right?
Extremely strict. It mandates that the saviors must be kin of Firestar's kin.
Which radically narrows the suspect pool down to almost nothing.
Exactly. The narrative effectively bypasses all the seasoned adult warriors and drops this immense apocalyptic burden squarely onto the shoulders of a brand new generation.
Specifically, two young apprentices. Two sisters, actually, Dovepaw and Ivypaw.
Yes, and the burden falls entirely on Dovepaw at first, who is revealed as the true third cat.
So we need to deeply analyze the specific nature of her power, because it is not a conventional combat advantage at all.
No, not like Lionblaze. Dovepaw possesses supernatural sight and hearing. Her sensory perception extends far, far beyond the physical limitations of biology.
See, I found her power to be less of a gift and more of a horrific biological glitch.
How so?
Well, it's just complete sensory overload.
Yeah.
Imagine having your brain forcefully wired into the planet's entire surveillance network.
Oh, wow.
You can hear a conversation happening miles across the lake, or the sound of a predator stepping on a single twig 2 territories over.
That would be maddening.
Right.
Okay.
But she's just a kid. Nobody handed her an instruction manual on how to calibrate this massive input. She completely lacks the neurological filter to turn the volume down.
So just the act of trying to exist is exhausting.
Exactly. Trying to sit in the camp and eat a meal or just learn basic hunting crouches, it's a deafening, blinding nightmare of infinite data.
And the psychological toll of that infinite data is profound isolation. Dovepaw's perception of reality is fundamentally incompatible with every single other cat around her.
Because she reacts to stimuli that literally no one else can perceive.
Right, which makes her appear highly erratic or distracted to the uninitiated.
But the adult prophecy bearers, Lionblaze and Jayfeather, they recognize exactly what she is right away.
They do, and they immediately extract her from her peer group. They start pulling her into these clandestine meetings, burdening a literal trainee with the knowledge that the spiritual fabric of their entire universe is unraveling.
They treat her like a weapon before she even understands how to be a person.
That is exactly what happens.
And while Dovepaw is being aggressively elevated into this sort of pantheon of demigods, we really have to look at the collateral damage of that elevation.
The sister left standing on the sidelines?
Yes, Ivy Paw.
Ivy Paw represents the most dangerous element in the entire narrative precisely because she is ordinary.
Yeah, she possesses no supernatural abilities, no cosmic destiny.
And from her localized perspective, her sister hasn't actually accomplished anything to warrant this sudden, obsessive attention from the clan's most powerful figures.
It's just the banality of Ivy Paw's jealousy that makes it so lethal. It is such a deeply grounded, uncomfortable human emotion.
We have all experienced that corrosive feeling of being chronically overlooked, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. Watching a peer or a sibling inexplicably bypass you for no apparent reason.
The narrative brilliance here is weaponizing that exact insecurity.
Right, because it's not a lack of border patrols or a sudden shortage of prey that compromises the security of the clans.
No, it is a teenager feeling utterly unspecial in a society that actively worships exceptionalism.
That emotional vulnerability is the damp wood the termites need to begin their work.
Perfectly said. But before the psychological infiltration truly begins, the narrative introduces what appears to be a massive physical environmental crisis.
The drought.
Right. The literal lifeblood of all 4 clans begins to rapidly recede. A severe, devastating drought sets in.
It is a total ecological disaster. The mud is cracking, the fish are dying, the water supply is just vanishing.
But Dovepaw, utilizing that overwhelming sensory input we talked about, detects that this isn't merely a lack of rainfall.
Because she can hear it, right?
Exactly. She can hear vast quantities of water churning behind a massive blockage far upstream, completely beyond clan borders.
Which prompts an unprecedented response. A joint task force is assembled.
Cats from thunderclan, riverclan, windclan, and shadowclan, including Lionblaze, Dovepaw, Rippletail, and Tigerheart, are all dispatched to follow the dried riverbed and eliminate this blockage.
And the source of this apocalyptic drought turns out to be a very mundane physical construction.
A beaver dam.
Yeah, a beaver dam. I have to admit, when I was analyzing the structural pacing here, this subplot initially felt like a severe genre misfire.
Really? A misfire.
Yeah. I mean, we are primed for an existential ghost war. We're dealing with ancient prophecies and characters who can read minds. And suddenly, the plot diverts into an expedition where our mystical warriors have to forge a temporary alliance with local house cats' kitty pets, to gnaw on wooden branches and wage war against a family of beavers.
It does sound a bit absurd when you lay it out like that.
Right. It feels like a bizarre distraction from the actual stakes we were promised.
Well, I would argue it operates as a vital sociological pressure cooker rather than a distraction.
Okay, how so?
You have to evaluate the historical context of these 4 clans. For generations, their default setting has been intense, bloody tribalism.
True. They fight over inches of border territory constantly.
They let each other starve during harsh winters. The beaver expedition violently strips away those tribal distinctions.
It forces proximity. They are marching through totally unknown territory, entirely cut off from their respective leadership structures.
Precisely that. It acts as a much-needed stress test for interclan diplomacy.
And when they finally confront the beavers, it is a brutal physical melee.
It really is. And the riverclan warrior, Rippletail, is viciously killed during the assault.
That casualty is so critical to the thematic development. It forces a thunderclan cat to mourn a riverclan cat.
It forces them to bleed into the exact same soil, to strategize together, and ultimately to dismantle the dam as a single, cohesive unit.
So the returning water is almost secondary to the sociological breakthrough.
Exactly. It is a microcosm of the ultimate climax. The narrative is forcefully demonstrating that these fractured, hyperpartisan clans are actually physically capable of coalition building.
Because they are going to need that exact muscle memory when the Dark Forest finally breaches the physical realm.
They absolutely will. So the beavers are a mechanical decoy, but the emotional diplomacy forged at that dam is the actual point of the quest.
That makes a lot of sense. So while Dovepaw is out in the world, actively saving the entire ecosystem and being hailed as this miraculous savior, we have to shift our focus back to the home front.
Because Ivypaw did not go on that quest.
Right. She remained in the dusty, drought-stricken camp, basically marinating in her own perceived inadequacy.
And this is where the psychological horror truly begins to escalate.
The physical crisis of the lake drying up is resolved, but the emotional environment is incredibly toxic.
Ivypaw is primed for radicalization. The Dark Forest realizes that frontal assaults against the living clans are just inefficient.
I mean, why wage a physical war when you can simply recruit the enemy's youth to dismantle the society from the inside out?
Exactly. And the methodology of the Dark Forest's recruitment is chillingly sophisticated. They do not approach Ivypaw with monstrous demands or overt cruelty.
No, they send Hawkfrost.
Hawkfrost is the perfect recruiter. He is the deceased son of Tiger Star charismatic, physically imposing, and incredibly perceptive.
When he slips into Ivypaw's dreams, he doesn't present himself as a demon at all.
He presents himself as a mentor who finally sees her true value.
The dialogue is straight out of a cult induction manual. He essentially tells her, your leaders are blind. Your sister is stealing your light. But here, in this training ground, we recognize your potential.
We will give you the skills to make them respect you. It's incredibly manipulative.
He isolates her emotionally before he isolates her ideologically.
Yes. He validates her resentment. By offering her specialized combat training in the dreamscape, he creates an exclusive, secret bond.
To Ivypaw, she isn't joining a terror cell of dead war criminals, you know. She thinks she is attending a private elite academy that will finally allow her to outshine Dovepaw.
And the tragic irony is that the waking world inadvertently assists the Dark Forest's radicalization efforts by providing a steady stream of senseless trauma.
Yeah, just as Ivypaw is beginning to feel empowered in her dreams, the physical reality of the clans is hit by an act of sheer, indifferent violence.
The falling tree.
Right. A massive beech tree spontaneously collapses directly into the center of the thunderclan camp.
It is an event totally devoid of political motivation or supernatural malice. It is simply the brutal reality of living in a forest.
But the consequences are devastating. Longtail, a respected elder who had already adapted to blindness, is completely crushed to death.
And Briarpaw, a young, intensely energetic apprentice, has her spine shattered. She is permanently paralyzed in her hindquarters.
The psychological whiplash for the clan is immense. I mean, they survive a drought, only to have their sanctuary crushed by gravity and rotting wood.
There is no enemy to fight. You cannot declare war on a fallen tree.
Right. The sheer helplessness that permeates the clan after Briarpaw's paralyzation creates an atmosphere of deep, pervasive depression.
And that ambient despair acts as a massive accelerant for the Dark Forest.
Because when society feels structurally helpless against the whims of nature, the promise of absolute, unyielding strength becomes intoxicating.
Exactly. The Dark Forest thrives on the clan's diminishing morale. And as their sleeper agent network grows, the architect of this spiritual insurgency, Tiger Star, decides it is time to deploy his assets to destabilize the political landscape.
So Tiger Star utilizes Ivypaw as a direct conduit for disinformation.
In her dreams, he feeds her a completely fabricated intelligence report, claiming that ShadowClan is massing at the borders, preparing to invade ThunderClan to steal territory.
And Ivypaw, genuinely believing she has uncovered a critical threat through her elite training, relays this lie directly to her leader, Firestar.
She becomes the unwitting architect of a proxy war.
Because Firestar, relying on what he believes is actionable intelligence from a trusted clanmate, decides to abandon diplomacy.
He authorizes a preemptive military strike against ShadowClan.
The resulting battle is just a masterpiece of tragic irony. It is a war fought over a phantom threat, engineered by a ghost, resulting in very real, devastating physical consequences.
And this skirmish brings us to a critical breaking point for Lion Blaze.
Yes, because during the chaos of the battle, Lion Blaze engages in combat with the shadowclan deputy Russet Fur.
We must carefully analyze the mechanics of Lion Blaze's power here. His prophecy-granted ability isn't just a high pain tolerance.
No, it is absolute kinetic invincibility.
His body cannot be damaged in a fight, but that physical absolute comes with a horrific lack of modulation.
When the adrenaline spikes, Lion Blaze cannot physically lose, which means he loses the ability to measure his own force.
He hits with the disproportionate impact of a freight train.
In the frenzy of the skirmish, he applies way too much pressure. He accidentally breaks Russet Fur, killing the shadowclan deputy outright.
He essentially acts as a weapon of mass destruction in a localized border dispute.
The psychological fallout for Lion Blaze is immediate and severe. He realizes that his divine gift is entirely incompatible with the fragile, mortal biology of the cats around him.
He becomes deeply terrified of his own physical capacity.
But the political fallout is even worse. You cannot accidentally kill a neighboring state's second-in-command and expect a diplomatic resolution.
Absolutely not. The death of Russet Fur permanently shatters the fragile coalition that was built during the beaver crisis.
The lake descends into a state of hyper-paranoia. ShadowClan isolates itself, ThunderClan is viewed as a rogue aggressor, and the physical borders are just locked down completely.
The environment is perfectly primed for the enemy. The fog of war is so dense that the Dark Forest no longer even has to hide its recruitment efforts.
Right. The living clans are too busy pointing fingers at each other to notice their apprentices are waking up exhausted and scarred from dream combat.
But the espionage operation finally hits a snag.
Jayfeather.
Yes. Jayfeather, utilizing his ability to walk through the dreamscape, bypasses these standard spiritual boundaries and pieces together exactly where Ivypaw's consciousness is traveling at night.
He and Lion Blaze corner her. They forcefully shatter the illusion Hawkfrost built.
They reveal to Ivypaw that her mentors are not misunderstood elites, but the most prolific murderers in clan history, and that she has been aiding an apocalyptic mobilization.
The revelation is a profound psychological shock for her. Ivypaw's entire framework of validation just collapses into sheer horror.
Her initial, entirely rational instinct is to defect immediately. She wants to confess to the clan, beg for forgiveness, and sever all ties with the dreamscape forever.
Which leads to one of the most morally complex, ruthless decisions made by the protagonist in the entire series.
Oh, it really is.
Jayfeather and Lion Blaze forbid her from quitting.
They look at a traumatized teenager who has just realized she joined an extremist cult, and they order her to go back in.
They need actionable intelligence. They need a mole.
They conscript her into a deep-cover espionage operation, and the psychological endurance required for this assignment is staggering.
She has to return to the Dark Forest every single night, surrounded by supernatural sociopaths who can literally read fear and weakness.
She has to actively participate in brutal, bloodletting sparring matches, pretending to harbor genocidal hatred toward her own family.
Knowing that a single slip in her facade will result in her consciousness being obliterated before she can even wake up.
It is the ultimate undercover operative nightmare.
She is risking the corruption of her own soul to maintain her cover. She is absorbing the trauma of the enemy's ideology without any psychological support network.
And while Ivypaw is navigating this hellish espionage, her sister Dovewing, she has earned her warrior name by now, is navigating her own form of isolation.
Right, Dovewing begins a clandestine, illicit romance with Tigerheart, the ShadowClan warrior she met during the Beaver expedition.
Which is a profound violation of the warrior code to cross borders for romance, especially in a climate of such heightened political paranoia.
And simultaneously, Lion Blaze attempts to pursue a relationship with his clanmate, Cinderheart, which forces him to confront the alienating nature of his own existence.
When Lion Blaze finally discloses the truth to Cinderheart, that he is part of a cosmic prophecy, that he possesses literal invincibility, and that the fate of the entire world rests on his bloodline, her reaction defies typical fantasy tropes.
She doesn't embrace him. She doesn't promise to stand by his side.
No, she initiates a deeply pragmatic, heartbreaking separation.
Cinderheart acknowledges her own mundane reality. She tells Lion Blaze that his existence is tethered to the divine, that he belongs to StarClan and the overarching fate of the universe.
She recognizes that an ordinary warrior cannot compete with the gravity of a demigod's destiny.
She removes herself from the equation not out of lack of affection, but out of a profound sense of ontological incompatibility.
Looking at both Dovewing and Lionblaze, we see the prophecy acting not as a superpower fantasy, but as a sociological quarantine.
That's a great way to put it. Delvin's supernatural perception alienates her from her peers, so she seeks a desperate, forbidden connection across enemy lines just to feel a sliver of normalcy.
And Lionblaze's invincibility literally pushes away the one cat who attempts to ground his humanity. They are caged by their own exceptionalism.
And that concept of a cage becomes increasingly literal as the infrastructure of the clans begins to collapse under the weight of the paranoia.
The political isolation bleeds into the spiritual realm, particularly affecting the medicine cats, who are the designated communicators with StarClan.
We see this breakdown perfectly encapsulated in the tragic arc of Flametail.
Flametail is the shadowclan medicine cat. He is deeply pious, highly competent, but he is entirely out of the loop regarding the core prophecy.
All he knows is that his dreams are being hijacked by horrific, apocalyptic visions of darkness consuming the lake.
He is experiencing the symptoms of the impending war without any diagnostic context whatsoever.
And his rising panic is abruptly cut short by an event of sheer, terrifying physical reality.
It occurs during Leaf Bear, the dead of winter. The lake has frozen over, and several cats venture out onto the ice.
This scene is suffocating just to analyze. Flametail hits a patch of thin ice and plunges right through.
The kinetic shock of the freezing water, the disorientation, the sheer terror of looking up and seeing a solid ceiling of ice.
Unable to locate the fracture he fell through, it is a primal nightmare.
And Jayfeather, despite his blindness, physically dives into the freezing lake.
He manages to locate Flametail in the dark water. He grips his scruff. He is actively hauling him toward the surface.
But the rescue is intercepted by a metaphysical mandate.
An ancient spiritual entity manifests to Jayfeather in the freezing water, delivering a devastating ultimatum.
The entity informs Jayfeather that it is Flametail's immutable destiny to die beneath the ice, and that if Jayfeather refuses to release his grip, the timeline will correct itself by drowning them both.
It is an impossible trolley problem scenario enforced by the universe itself.
Jayfeather is forced to override every instinct he possesses as a healer.
He releases his grip. He allows Flametail to sink into the dark, preserving his own life to fulfill the prophecy.
But because this agonizing decision occurs beneath the ice, completely devoid of witnesses, the physical aftermath is a forensic disaster.
Right. Dawnpilt, Flametail's grieving sister, examines the circumstantial evidence. She knows Lionblaze recently killed the shadowclan deputy.
She knows thunderclan is acting erratic.
She sees Jayfeather emerge from the water alone, while her brother's body remains trapped.
Her conclusion is mathematically tragic but politically logical. She formally accuses Jayfeather of premeditated murder.
The accusation detonates whatever fragile piece remained. ShadowClan formally severs all spiritual and political ties.
The medicine cats, who are supposed to be the immune system of the clans, are completely paralyzed by infighting.
They refuse to share omens at the moon pool. The communication lines to StarClan are entirely cut.
The Dark Forest hasn't even launched a physical invasion yet, and they have already achieved total systemic collapse.
Which is insane. With the modern socio-political structure in ruins, the narrative is forced to find a solution outside the boundaries of the present timeline.
This initiates a staggering metaphysical pivot. Jayfeather receives visions directing him to leave the lake and travel far into the mountains to the domain of the tribe of Rushing Water.
A heavily armed patrol consisting of Jayfeather, Dovewing, Squirrelflight, and Foxleap undertakes the journey.
And what happens in the mountains radically alters the genre of the narrative.
Jayfeather doesn't just receive passive historical visions. He is subjected to literal, physical time travel.
He falls asleep in the present, and his consciousness overrides the body of his ancient counterpart, a cat named Jay's Wing, who lived long before the clans were ever conceptualized.
The inclusion of a time travel narrative in a story primarily focused on feral political maneuvering requires really careful analysis.
It is not a careless trope. It is a meticulously constructed bootstrap paradox that solidifies the foundational lore of the entire universe.
Let's dissect the mechanics of this paradox because it is brilliant. Jayfeather arrives in the deep past and fully integrates into the life of Jay's Wing.
He experiences genuine emotional attachment, falling deeply in love with an ancient cat named Half Moon.
However, he observes that the ancient society is facing slow starvation in their current environment near the lake.
Jayfeather possesses the historical foresight to know that the ancestors of the modern clans must originate from the mountains.
Therefore, he realizes that the ancient cats must migrate from the lake into the harsh mountain environment to establish the tribe of Rushing Water, which will eventually birth the founders of the clans.
He is trapped in a horrific loop of causality.
If he doesn't force the ancient cats to leave their home and march into the brutal mountains, the tribe is never formed.
If the tribe is never formed, the clans never exist.
If the clans never exist, Jayfeather is never born to travel back in time.
He is forced to engineer his own genesis. He utilizes the immense social capital of Jay's wing to persuade Halfmoon and the rest of the ancients to abandon their territory.
He anoints Halfmoon as the first teller of the pointed stones, the inaugural leader of the tribe.
It is an act of profound self-mutilation.
He must break the heart of the woman he loves, condemn her to a life of harsh survival in the mountains, and permanently sever his own happiness, all to ensure that the timeline remains intact.
He secures the survival of his species, but the emotional cost is absolute. The lore is essentially an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, and Jayfeather is the one forcing the jaws shut.
Having secured the foundational past, the narrative forcefully, violently yanks us back to the precarious present.
Because while Jayfeather was stabilizing the timeline, the remnants of the past have arrived at the lake to exploit the present chaos.
Saul makes his return. We analyzed Saul deeply in the previous arc. He's the ultimate opportunist, a psychological manipulator who doesn't use claws, but uses rhetoric to dismantle belief systems.
Saul observes the extreme paranoia permeating the lake, particularly the tension between thunderclan and windclan.
He infiltrates windclan and identifies One Star's deep-seated insecurity regarding thunderclan's perceived superiority.
Saul applies leverage to that insecurity with surgical precision. He convinces One Star that a preemptive, total annihilation strike is the only way to secure windclan's sovereignty.
He provides them with the tactical advantage of the underground tunnel network, allowing them to bypass thunderclan's border patrols entirely.
It is a brilliant, cowardly strategy. Windclan forces erupt from the earth directly into the center of the thunderclan camp.
The defense is completely overwhelmed. But just as the camp is about to fall, the narrative delivers its most emotionally resonant resurrection.
A black cat violently bursts from the tunnel shadows, fighting with a terrifying, synchronized efficiency, driving back the windclan invasion.
Hollyleaf.
The sister, who was presumed dead, crushed beneath the rocks at the climax of the previous arc.
She survived the cave-in and has spent the entire duration of this arc living in total isolation within the subterranean cave system.
Her return is not just a tactical reinforcement, it is the culmination of a massive psychological rehabilitation.
Let's analyze her confrontation with Saul during the aftermath of the battle. She manages to pin Saul to the ground. This is the architect of countless miseries, the cat who preyed on the clan's vulnerabilities.
If we look at the psychological profile of the old Hollyleaf, the rigid, dogmatic zealot who murdered Ashfur simply to protect a secret that violated the warrior code, she would have executed Saul without a microsecond of hesitation.
The old Hollyleaf viewed justice entirely through the lens of lethal punishment for code infractions.
But the Hollyleaf who emerges from the tunnels makes a fundamentally different calculation.
She releases her grip. She allows Saul to stand up. She orders him to walk away and never return. She actively chooses mercy over execution.
That decision illustrates a profound evolution in her understanding of morality. Her prolonged isolation in the dark forced her to confront her own horrific hypocrisy.
She realized that adhering blindly to the rigid text of the law only creates monsters.
By sparing Saul, she demonstrates that she finally grasps the actual spirit of the warrior code, the preservation of life, the exercise of restraint, and the understanding that true honor cannot be built on a foundation of blind vengeance.
She had to be completely broken by the rigidity of the system in order to rebuild herself into a cat capable of genuine grace.
Her return completes the broken triad of siblings just as the entire narrative structure reaches its terminal velocity.
Every political fracture, every double-cross spy, every time travel paradox converges on a single apocalyptic bottleneck.
A great battle.
The Dark Forest ceases its covert operations. The spiritual barrier between the living and the dead completely dissolves.
The sky above the lake turns pitch black as physical manifestations of deceased war criminals. Tiger Star, Hawkfrost, Broken Star march out of the shadows, leading legions of corrupted spirits.
The sheer metaphysics of this battle are staggering. These aren't ethereal ghosts passing through trees. They possess physical mass, teeth, and claws.
They can bleed, and they can kill.
And as the vanguard crashes into the clan camps, the Dark Forest generals issue the activation order to their sleeper agents.
The living cats who have been training in the dreamscape are commanded to turn on their leaders and slaughter their clanmates.
The entire strategy of the Dark Forest hinges on this moment of mass betrayal. And this is exactly where Ivy Pool's agonizing, soul-crushing tenure as a deep-cover operative pays its ultimate dividend.
Ivy Pool steps into the absolute center of the chaos. She stands between the towering demonic generals of the Dark Forest and the terrified, confused ranks of the living trainees.
She leverages every ounce of credibility she purchased with her own blood during those sparring matches.
She looks at the trainees and systematically deprograms them in real time. She yells, "They don't care about you. They never wanted to make you strong. They only want to use you to destroy the only home you have."
It is a masterstroke of counterpropaganda. The Dark Forest recruited these caps by validating their feelings of alienation.
Ivy Pool offers them an immediate, visceral alternative, the chance to actively save their families, to transform from alienated outcasts into the undeniable saviors of their society.
The psychological hold shatters. The vast majority of the living trainees violently turn on their dead masters, fundamentally altering the tactical geometry of the battlefield.
But even with the sleeper agents defecting, the sheer numerical superiority of the dead is overwhelming. The clans are being slaughtered.
And in the midst of this absolute carnage, the prophecy reaches its final requirement. 3 must become 4.
Jayfeather, Lionblaze, and Dovewing are fighting desperately, but the cosmic equation demands a 4th avatar to stabilize the magical resonance.
And the identity of the 4th cat is finally unveiled.
It is Firestar.
The revelation is so elegantly simple, it almost feels audacious.
When you analyze the structural integrity of the entire franchise, it could not mathematically be anyone else.
The narrative began 4 real-world years and countless in-universe generations ago with a prophecy about fire saving the clan.
Firestar has been the unchanging moral anchor, the philosophical true north of this universe since he first walked into the forest as a house cat.
He is the literal embodiment of the clan's capacity for change and endurance. The narrative arc of the universe started with his ascension. It is structurally required to end with his culmination.
But his inclusion does not negate the physical toll of the conflict. The battle demands a horrific blood sacrifice.
StarClan, the benevolent ancestors, descend in physical form to fight alongside the living, creating an absolute meat grinder of a battlefield where the history of the clans is literally fighting itself.
The casualties are staggering, and the narrative refuses to sanitize the violence.
We witness the permanent destruction of Spotted Leaf's spirit. She sacrifices her eternal existence to intercept a fatal blow meant for Sandstorm.
We watch Firmcloud, a cat who spent her entire life nurturing the future generations, violently killed while defending the nursery.
Mousefur, the cantankerous, deeply beloved elder, falls in combat. And then there is Hollyleaf.
Hollyleaf's death is the thematic closure of her redemption.
She intercepts Hawkfrost to save Ivy Pool's life. She sustains massive, fatal trauma.
But as she dies, surrounded by Jayfeather and Lionblaze, she articulates a profound piece.
She's no longer terrified of the code, no longer burdened by the circumstances of her birth. She dies knowing with absolute certainty that she belongs to thunderclan.
It is a beautiful, devastating conclusion to a character who spent her entire life running from her own shadow.
The sheer volume of death clears the narrative stage for the final, inevitable confrontation. The ideological duel that has been simmering for 4 entire arcs.
Firestar against the physical manifestation of Tigerstar's spirit.
This combat is not merely physical. It is the ultimate clash of sociological philosophies.
Tigerstar represents the absolute worst impulses of the warrior code genetic supremacy, dictatorial fascism, the belief that empathy is a biological weakness, and that power justifies any atrocity.
While Firestar represents the progressive evolution of the clan's diplomacy, the belief that worth is determined by choices rather than bloodlines, and the radical concept of interclan empathy.
They collide as the camp literally burns around them. It is a brutal, exhausting brawl between 2 ancient forces.
The Firestar, drawing on the culmination of his experience and the weight of his destiny, manages to strike the catastrophic blow.
He slaughters Tigerstar's spirit, permanently erasing his consciousness from the fabric of reality.
The ideological anchor of the Dark Forest is severed, and the remaining dead immediately shatter and retreat into the void. The tyranny is extinguished.
The victory is absolute, but the cost of that victory requires the ultimate transaction.
A burning tree branch collapses near Firestar, fulfilling the poetic echo of the original fire prophecy.
Firestar, having sustained massive trauma during the duel and having fully expended the last of his 9 divinely granted lives, succumbs to his injuries.
He bleeds out in the mud of the territory he spent his entire life defending.
His death is a monumental shift in the gravity of the universe. The mourning sequence is extensive and profoundly heavy.
But the structural mandate of the clans is that leadership must endure.
In the immediate aftermath, Firestar's deputy, Brambleclaw, who has spent his life fighting in the shadow of being Tigerstar's biological son, travels to the moon pool.
He receives his 9 lives, ascending as Bramblestar, and in his very first act of leadership, he selects Squirrelflight to be his deputy, formally initiating a completely new era of governance.
So the sheer exhaustion of analyzing that climax is real. It is a breathless, sweeping conclusion to a saga of immense proportions.
But before we completely wrap up this deep dive, we have to pull back the curtain on the actual construction of this narrative.
Oh, the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, because the meta-history of how this arc was written reveals that we almost received a vastly different, vastly inferior story.
The archival trivia surrounding the drafting of Omen of the Stars is fascinating. Early story bibles and author notes reveal that the overarching antagonist was originally conceptualized to be Midnight the Badger.
Wait, Midnight. The mystical, star-reading badger who served as a benevolent guide during the second arc.
The very same. The original draft posited that Midnight had been orchestrating a massive, multi-generational conspiracy against the cats since the catastrophic badger invasion in the Twilight novel, utilizing Saul as her primary intelligence asset.
That is just mind-blowing. Consider the structural implications if they had proceeded with that outline. It would have fundamentally neutered the entire thematic resonance of the arc.
It would have ruined the architecture of the narrative completely.
If Midnight is the villain, the conflict reverts entirely to an external, physical race war badgers versus cats. It's just another earthquake.
Exactly. The sheer terror of this arc stems from the fact that the threat is internal. The termites are already in the walls.
The clans are fighting their own grandfathers, their own suppressed ideologies, their own alienated youth. You cannot execute a psychological cult deprogramming narrative if the cult leader is a badger.
Thankfully, the editorial team, specifically Erica Sussman, recognized this thematic incongruity and successfully lobbied the writing team to pivot toward the psychological ghost war.
It was an editorial intervention that salvaged the legacy of the franchise, allowing the narrative to explore the profound complexities of radicalization and systemic vulnerability.
It is a true testament to the power of revising a premise to serve the theme. Omen of the Stars successfully cashed the massive narrative checks written by the previous 3 arcs.
It explored the agonizing burden of predestination, the banality of jealousy, the mechanics of ideological radicalization, and the tragic necessity of ultimate sacrifice.
It represents the undisputed golden age of this universe's geopolitical and spiritual lore.
And to you, the listener, who has waded through the intricate bloodlines, the shifting borders, and the metaphysical crises alongside us across these 4 foundational arcs, you possess a comprehensive mastery of this world.
You really do. But as we close the book on this era, we must leave you with a final, deeply uncomfortable question to examine.
We spent hours analyzing the methodology of the Dark Forest. We noted that they did not recruit their sleeper agents through brute force, but by actively listening to the alienated youth of the clans.
They validated the insecurities of cats who felt crushed by the rigid, unforgiving dogma of the warrior code.
So we must ask, Firestar is dead, Tigerstar is erased, and the physical manifestation of the Ghost Army has been driven back into the void. The immediate threat is neutralized.
But did surviving the Great Battle actually compel the clans to fix the systemic sociological flaws that manufactured those alienated apprentices in the first place?
Can defeating the symptom of a broken society magically repair the underlying disease?
The house didn't collapse today, but did they actually fumigate the termites, or did they simply sweep the dust under the rug and apply a fresh coat of paint to the rotting wood?
A heavy question for the new era. Until next time, keep diving deep.